He's hooked. Get it, there he goes, there he goes. That's more like it, and he's off. And you should always play the fish on the reel, otherwise you've got line dangling around your feet. You could stand on it, could get caught in a tree root or anything like that. Keep your rod high, never panic when you're playing a fish. It's too easy when you hook the first few trout to try and rush the thing to get the fish in, but never panic. The fish does what he wants. Let's bring him in when he doesn't do anything, and as soon as he starts to pull, hand off the reel and let him go. Keeping the rod high, there he goes. And the rod acts as a natural spring when you keep the rod high like this. There he goes, no rush to get him in. Anytime he wants to run, just let him go. And then bring him back in again. And it's just a battle of wills. And we've got to be careful here, we've got some weeds, so I'm just doing a little bit of side strain, left-hand side strain, turning the fish out, and we can see the fish swimming out to the middle of the lake now, away from the close bank. I don't want to get him into the bank, well caught in the weeds if we do that. So I've got him in control now, here he is. And at this early stage, very important to get your net ready, so you've got the first opportunity to net him, he's yours. Crouch low, don't let the fish see you, they don't like coming into shallow water, and they certainly don't like seeing anglers, so you always crouch low when you're playing the fish. Apply a little bit more side strain here. So he's coming into the weeds, but don't panic, don't jump up, and because the sudden movement will spook him. He'll just turn out to the middle with some side strain like that. There he is. In fact, there's another one following him. And see what he goes. Woo! He's off. Look at that. He doesn't like that shallow water. Never liked shallow water. Let's bring him back again. Here he comes. He's coming to the surface a bit now, and that's what we want to see. That's a sign of the fish getting tired. Now, for the first time, he's going to the left, so you apply a little bit of right-hand side strain. Draw him up. Gradually. Oh, he's off again. Doesn't like that shallow water. And there's a little bit of a battle here. Who's going to tire out first, me or the fish? Hopefully the fish. If he's a big one, usually me. And we bring it in, and the other mistake which beginners tend to make is trying to wind the fish right up to the rod. Keep outside about a rod length of leader here. I've got about 9 foot of leader on here, and I'm not going to wind it any nearer than that. That's easily close enough for me to net. Once that fish is tired, it's easily close enough for me to net. And again, don't rush. That's the biggest thing to remember when playing a fish. Never rush. The fish is boss until he's tired. There he comes. He's starting to play around on the surface now, and that's a good sign. You must almost be ready. Now, usually when I say that, they shoot off. Keep the net underwater, hidden. That's it. And then what you're trying to do is lift his head up out of the water and then just glide him straight over the net mesh. There's his head. Now, is he going to? No, he's turned. He saw me. They don't like seeing people. Here he comes. No, he's giving a good old account for himself, this little chap. Well, he's not too bad. I'd say about £2, £2.4. Nice rainbow trout. Hopefully we can get ourselves a little brown trout later on, and you can see the difference. Okay, keep his head up, 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 and he's in. And we swing him ashore. And that's what nymphing's all about, catching trout like that, light tackle, wonderful. And the key here is to quickly and instantly hit the fish on the head, don't let him suffer, and straight away you've caught a trout, and the first trout of the day on the nymph. Absolute brilliant fishing, nymphing, absolute brilliant. All right, we've got him in, dispatched it, need to unhook it. Hook right in the scissors, just where you should get all your fish, never down the throat, unhook it. And this is a rainbow trout. Let's have a look at the markings on it. Typical rainbow trout, nice purple sheen, freckles rather than spots. We'll see, hopefully we'll see a brown trout later on, and brown trout have got round spots rather than freckles and a golden flank. But this is a beautiful condition of rainbow. If you ever need to have a look at your rainbow, pick it up and just hold him out, and that's how you take a picture. And that is what fly fishing is all about, catching these. What a wonderful start. Now, one of the most important stages, it's particularly of your first fish, is to spoon it out. And that's just a term we give to really see what the fish has been feeding on. And the term comes from the implement we use, which is a marrow spoon. And it's in the end of my piece. So you screw that together, and really you can expect anything in the fish's stomach. so you're not too sure quite what the fish are feeding on. And we have a look. And the way to spoon a fish is you turn the fish around and lift the fish slightly off the ground, hold it sideways on, and you're going to insert the spoon right down the fish's mouth. Remember which way up the spoon is, because it's very easy to pull the spoon out upside down. And you push it right in, you give a good old twist round and really scrape back along the walls of its stomach to see what he's been eating. And nothing in that one. Try again, try a bit deeper. Now if there's nothing in it, that shows, yes, he's not been feeding at all, this fish. There's virtually nothing in here at all. And sometimes you're going to find that the fish have been eating bugs like snails and spiders, various buzzers, various types of insects, and that's what you're looking for. Not necessarily just to see what they've been feeding on, but to see what type of depth the fish are at, whether they're feeding on adult flies on the surface, or pupa, which could be mid-water, or larva, which could be right at the bottom. So it's always worth spooning your fish and seeing what the fish has been feeding on. This one hasn't been feeding, so there's no point in changing the fly for that purpose. And what you'll need to do is keep the fish fresh. And when the sun's out like this and it's a nice warm day, the fish will dry out in the sunshine. So we put them into a bass bag, and you just put them into that bass bag, and then again, to keep the fish fresh, you need to insert that into the lake, and the water will seep through the bass bag and keep the fish fresh. And just a little stone on top of the bass stops it floating away. And that's how we get that fresh. Now I think we'll change the nymph. The nymph was very, very successful, and it shows you how easy it is to catch fish on the nymph. But now we're going to try a dry fly. There's plenty of fish rising on the lake. In fact, the fish haven't stopped rising, and you cannot turn down an opportunity like that. When fish are coming up to the surface, you have to really try a dry fly. So we'll have the nymph off, and one of the most useful techniques when dry fly fishing is what we call the suspended buzzer, and that's the type of dry fly I'm going to start off with. So we'll take the nymph off, and this is the box of dries, and as you can see they range in a variety of colours. I'll stick the nymph in there for the time being. They range in a variety of colours and sizes, and you've got to really think of what the fish are feeding on, and I think the fish are going to be feeding on something like this little chap. This is an elk hair emerger. It's black. Black is the predominant colour of stillwater fish. They feed on black more than anything else. So we're going to tie a black fly on to start with, using the turtle knot as before. And you've got a couple of important rules to remember with dry fly fishing. Very, very important rule is that when the fish come up to take your dry fly, they do so hoping that it's a natural, or looking to be a natural. And there's no way in the world your fly will look to be natural if the leader's floating. So the very, very important rule, and this is where most beginners unfortunately go wrong, is that you coat the leader in a sinking compound to make it sink. Now first of all, the dry fly must float, so the dry fly is dunked into this chemical. This is just a waterproofing agent on the fly, keeps the fly dry and keeps it floating upright. And then, as I say, I think one of the most important tips of dry fly fishing is that we coat the leader in this sinking compound. It's easily done and commonly done with the wet fly, but very few anglers use this stuff on the dry fly, and it's perhaps more important with the dry than anything else. And as before, we wet the leader, about 3 foot of it, apply this sinking compound. It's just a degreasing agent really. The only reason a leader floats is because the leader's greasy, so we put on a degreaser and then wash it off. And that's the dry setup. And the technique, well, we'll show you the technique, but first I think we shall go over to the corner there. There's a few fish rising in that corner, and we'll give it a go. Let's see how successful the dry fly is. Right, here we are. As before, get your net ready, put it down by the side, ready for action. You don't want to be searching for your net when you've got a fish on. With the dry fly, having dunked it in that floatant, the feathers are still wet. Obviously the floatants are liquid, so you must dry the fly off with just some short, sharp casting, drying off the feathers. It's about 10 or 12 casts, and then pop the fly down, check it floats, and cast it out. And remember, the dry fly is floating. It's used to good effect when you cover rising fish. So really the most important rule with a dry fly fisherman is you aim for a trout. We'll put it out there first, there's nothing rising particularly, and you leave it there. And what you're trying to do with a dry fly is trying to represent a natural. So if you think of how a natural fly is going to be moving on the water, it's just going to blow around in the wind. And to that effect, you keep the line with a little bit of slack in it. You see, I haven't retrieved all the slack in the line. I keep a little bit of slack. The fly is going to drift around as per the wind. And in fact, here we don't have any wind, so the fly is just going to sit there, which makes the dry fly a little bit awkward. But the most important thing is observation. Whilst you look at your dry, you keep your eye on the water and see if we can see a fish rise. And remember what I was saying earlier on, the fish swim upwind, so when you see a fish rise, just put your fly upwind of the fish and he should come onto it. And there's one over there. We'll just put the fly in that direction. It's possibly out of range, but we'll put one in that direction in case he's swimming this way. And the fly is usually left static. You don't normally work your dry fly through the water, though if you get any interest in the fly and the fish perhaps refuse it, there's another fish a bit further over there. Now that's more like it. Now we should expect a fish there. It's pretty close to that feeding fish. He might come up to that. You can't see him at the moment. He's possibly gone off the other direction. That was a shame. Oh, there he is. You see, boiled right underneath the fly. Didn't take it, but the boil's underneath, and that's a good indication. There's something not quite right about that. Oh, he took it. Oh, too fast a strike on that one. That's an apprehension. That's a typical problem with dry flies. With a dry fly, you delay your strike. Never strike instantly with a dry. There's a fish there. That's better. That's it. That was a slower strike. And you see what happens when you cover a rise. I could see the fish in the water, and he came straight up for it. And I saw which direction that fish was swimming. Now, unfortunately, he's not running anywhere at the moment. And when fish don't do anything, you have to pull in by hand until you can get the slack out. So come on, fish, pull off that slack. I want to get him onto the reel as soon as possible. This is going to get caught around me otherwise. He's doing a little bit now. There he goes. Here he goes. That's better, on the reel. I feel much happier when he's on the reel. There's no way I can get entangled and stand on the line. No, he hasn't even got into first gear yet. There he goes. Oh, woo! Look at that one go. That's more like it. Now he knows he's hooked. There he comes. He's coming back on the surface. And again, he's doing everything. In fact, he's playing the fish himself. Yeah, he's not doing. I don't have to do anything. He's not going into weed or anything like that. He's just running off. And remember, always let that fish run. Oh, look at him go. Get on, go on, a bit further. No. Here he comes. He's come up to the top again. Short burst of runs like that means that he's going to tire himself up much quicker that way. It's just fine by me. And a very high rod. Note how high this rod is. It's so important when you're playing fish that you keep your rod tip up. He's come to shallow water again. He's not going to like that. He'll be off again any second now. There we go. I do not like shallow water. Now let's see if I can just turn him around into a situation where we're going to be able to net it. And he's staying on my left at the moment. Let's just turn him round to the right here. And again, as before, crouch down. Don't let him see you. Here he comes. Another rainbow. They don't like that shallow water. Look at him go. Wow. What beauties. Okay, he's coming in again. Now, I don't want him to get too near that weed, so I'll put a bit of side strain on him here. Now he's coming to shallow. Will he see me? I bet he will. And he looks like he's hooked right in the scissors, which is just perfect. Fine by me. Chuck the net in. Right, net in position. Keep low. That's more like it. He's coming out to the top a lot quicker than the other fish, so he's tiring. But never make the mistake of thinking that he's tired. He could just scoot off at any second, and tear off he will. If he sees me, as soon as he gets to that shallow water. There he goes, doesn't like that shallow water. Come on, in you come. Keeping that rod high. He's going towards some weed there, so we need to slowly turn him back to the centre. Nice flat rod, very steady pull when you've got this side strain. Don't force the fish, see how easy he comes, just like a dog on a lead. That's it, turned him. He's exactly where I want it, now right in front of me. And if he goes to the right of the net, I turn him left, bring him back towards the net, and if he tries going left of the net, you bring him to the right. Now, so his head's coming up a bit now, so he's tiring out. And he's going right again. He's certainly trying hard, this fish, but I think he must have exhausted himself with those two beautiful runs. He absolutely tore across the lake just now, and obviously that's going to play on the fish. So he's not, hopefully, got the strength for any more big runs. There he's going after the left, so we turn him gently to the right. As before, do not bring that fish in too near. The great temptation is to wind that line in. I know I said that earlier, but it's such an important tip for beginners to not wind in more. I see I've got at least 1.5 foot of fly line outside the rod and the whole leader. Here he comes. Don't let him see the net, keep the net still, and in we go. Oh, that's a better fish. That's another fish just like the other one. A bit fatter, maybe another ounce bigger than that last one. And as before, out with the priest and really bop him on the head before he's got a chance to suffer. A couple of hard blows, and that's another rainbow. And that one was on the dry, and you can see the fun of the dry fly is everything is active. You see the fish, you cover the fish, and if luck goes with you, he comes up, takes the fish, and you end up with a beautiful trout like this. Look at that beauty. And I'll unhook that in a moment, and in fact, he's unhooked himself. Look at that, he spat the hook out as he came into the net. So what more could you ask? And in a second, I'll give that a spoon and just see what's inside it. See if this one's been feeding on anything. Oh, look at that. Now that's what we're looking for. This is the advantage of a spoon. Look at this. You can see exactly all these bugs here. And there's one alive, squiggling away. Now these are all buzzers, or what the fishermen call buzzers, which are actually midge pupas. And they're the water insect version of the midge, the underwater version. And you can see, I mean, this is just one little dent in the spooning of the fish. So he's going to be crammed full of buzzers here. And that's going to give an indication if you were struggling, if you were finding fishing difficult, that would give an indication that one of the flies to put on would be perhaps a buzzer, fish near the surface, perhaps 6 inches down below the surface, maybe a foot down below the surface. And this is the advantage of the spoon. It just tells you if things get difficult, what the fish are feeding on, and perhaps a good idea to change to what. We didn't need it for this time being there because we fished a black fly, and it was the elk hair emerger, which is the imitation of a dry buzzer, and obviously it worked, and this one was feeding on what we were trying to imitate anyway. Right, the dry fly's out there again. We've just put it out to see if there's any fish rising around this area, and really you're looking for rising fish. You've got to cover rising fish with dry flies. Fish are feeding on the surface. There's no point in you just fishing blind like this. Wait for a fish to rise, but leave the fly out there where the fish are, just in case something pops its head up and takes your fly. Although, as I say, it's much better to actually take, there's a fish, there's a rise there. Now let's pick the fly. If we can just pop it down in the area of that fish, there he is. Now he's turned, you can see him, he's coming up. Is he going to come up? Oh, he's just underneath it. I can see him. He's coming back for a second look. No, he's gone away. He didn't like something about that. Oh, is that him? No. He just bolted straight at that fly. I thought he was going to take it down in one, but he didn't. Just turned away, and I think the reason is the leader is still floating, and he must have seen that leader and just turned. Oh, there he is. Having said that, he came back. Okay, we've got him back on again. Let's get onto the reel as fast as possible. Get all that slack line out of the way. Nice high rod. And we're in action. Here he goes. Now, is this one going to respond as all trout usually do? And when they get to shallow water, run, and off he goes. Or is he just going to come straight into the net? Well, he's not doing a lot, this chap. Keep him away from that weed. Turn him round. Now let's have a look. Remember, always get that net in position well in advance of you netting the fish, so the first opportunity you get to net it, you can land it. Keep his head out. And turn him away from trouble. And he's really intent on getting on that weed. Come on, fish. Get away from that weed bed. Oh, that's it. Ah, that's more like it. He's off at last. He's decided he's hooked. About time he realised he's hooked. And he's into gear. Come away from there. And go in that weed bed. Now, a little bit of side strain. We should just very carefully ease him round to the front. He saw me again. That's more like it. Now I've got him in control. There's no weed beds out there. Now if we can keep his head up, there he is, head out the water, just draw him in, and Bob's your uncle. Well, that's the success of the dry fly. And as before, you've got to dispatch this fish fairly quickly. Don't even take him out the net when you're dispatching the fish. The net's a good grip. It enables you to hold the fish. You don't drop the fish, it doesn't slip out your fingers. So hold the fish in the net when you're dispatching it. And please do dispatch your fish straight away. Don't leave it there suffering for a few minutes whilst you just find your priest. And then as before, we'll unhook the fish and slip it in the fish bass. Right, that's one on the dry fly. One of the things about dry fly fishing is that the slime from fish is the greatest sinkant of dry flies. So what you need to do, when you've caught a fish on the dry fly, a couple of things. And one of these is to take the slime off the fly, and the simplest way of doing that is to take a little bit of tissue paper out of your pocket and just mash the dry fly with a tissue paper. That way you're taking off the slime and grease and gunk from the fish's mouth, and that's all you need to do. You don't need to recoat it in floatant or anything like that. It'll float like a cork. And as before, if you handle the leader, if you start touching the leader in your fingers, you need to degrease the leader again. So before you cast out, another quick dollop of this sinking stuff, and the leader will once again be treated and should sink out of the fish's area. So we wet the leader, apply the sinkant, same as before, good old sinking gunk on the leader, that'll take the leader down, wet the leader again, and we are ready for action. As before, take your net and put the net in the water. It's got to be always ready for you. You never know when you're going to catch a fish, so we put the net ready, and let's see if we can get another fish on the dry fly. Dry it off, just in case there's any extra moisture, working out the line as before, looking for that rise, that all-important rising fish with the dry fly. And at the moment there's nothing rising, so we'll just pop the fly down, and we'll just leave him there and wait for a fish to rise in which we'll cover it. You might get one coming up now. There's a little bit of ripple on the surface now. This is good. I like a little bit of ripple around the dry fly. Makes it very hard to see the dry fly. In fact, I can hardly see it now. But I know roughly where it is. And if I see a boil in the surface film, I'll strike. And the sun's gone behind the cloud. Again, ideal dry fly conditions. The sun disappears, the fish come up, a little bit of ripple breaks the water surface. And in fact, I haven't a clue where my dry fly is at the moment, so I'll just cast that up again, dry the fly off, pop it down. And this is the one problem with fishing in too much ripple, is finding out where your dry fly is floating. I can see him now, he's just sitting in that surface film. Seems to have put the fish down, that's the problem with this one. I don't see many rising at the moment. So we'll just leave it there. And as before, I'm just giving it a little bit of slack in the line, just a foot of slack, not enough to inhibit the strike, but enough so that the fly can just drift across the current of the wind exactly as a natural would. And in fact, the slack's taken up there, so a little bit more slack. There's a fish rised close in to me here, but it's a little bit too close to cover that one. He'll probably see my rod action and rod movement and bolt, so there's no point in going for a fish too close. That one's a little bit further. Oh, he took it. Took it on the retrieve then, took that fly just as I started pulling it. Damn, missed that chap. In fact, he's broken the fly, look at that. Typical, broke the leader there, lost that fish, not paying any attention to that. Let's try another dry. Now, the last fly was very successful. I think we'll stick to the same sort of thing. Little dry fly, little elk hair emerger. In fact, it's typical, look at that, the wind has dropped again. The surface is becalmed as before, the fish will start popping up all over the place. But we need to get on another fly. And that shame about that, was one of my favourite dries. Never mind. Let's try an orange one this time, just to see if colour is playing any important role. I think orange is going to be easier for me to see, particularly when the ripple gets up. It's a little bit bigger fly, it's a little bit brighter colour, and it's going to be easier for us to see sitting on the water. Now, as before, tell not to tie on the fly, and you've got to go through this rigmarole. I know it seems laborious if you're putting on dry flies, because you have to coat the fly in floatant, you have to coat the leader in sinkant, but it's so important. You can see how successful the dry fly is when you get everything right. And that little bit of time just makes so much difference. Just that time. Too many anglers would just, with fish rising, there's a fish just popped out there again. Too many anglers would just be in a haste to get the fly out to the fish. Well, if you prepare yourself, take time to prepare yourself properly, you're going to be rewarded with a lot more fish than if you rush. So we'll dunk it in. And a sinkant again. I can't believe that fish. That was silly. I was just concentrating on another fish then. I just took my eye off the fly for 2/2 of a second. Just instantaneous, fish came up and took it. And that's such a golden rule of dry fly fishing. Don't take your eye off the fly for an instant, because you see what happens. As a result of that, I just picked up the fly to cast. Oh, there's a brownie. Look at that beautiful brownie. Fish leaping everywhere here, but they're usually brownies. I'd like to get a brownie if we can, just to show you the difference. Now there's a rise straight away. Let's see if he'll come up to the fly. That's right in the middle. Now, the water's calm now, so the one advantage with calm water is it makes it, and there's a better one, it makes it easier for you to see your dry fly. Fish rising behind me as well, but I've covered a rise there. Now let's have a look. There's another fish. Keep covering rising fish. If you're not covering rising fish, you're not in the area of feeding fish. He's just sitting in the surface. It's difficult to see that chap, but he's there. Now, a fish rising close in. Now we'll try another one. Let's just dry this fly off again. He's not floating very well, this dry. Don't know why. It was a very bushy dry when I took it out of the box. I thought this would float higher than anything else, but he's not drying, he's not floating, so let's dry him off. Now just keep it false casting, nice slow down a moment. Let's have a look. There's a rise. Let's see if we can get to this chap here. He's going to the right. Look at that. Put it bang in the rings, but he's moved to the right, that one. He's moving exactly as you expect. He's moving into the wind. I don't think he's going to come back for that one. He's too far away. No, he's moving to the right. He's still moving. He's 12, 15 feet away from the fly now. Oh, there's another one. He's right by it. He's coming up to it. Ooh, look at that. Let's give it a twitch. Just saw him. He's moved on. No, he's tight. Again, he come up. There's something not quite right about this fly. That's the third fish that's come up to have a look at it and turned away at the last second. It might be worth changing the fly. It may be this orange colour that's affecting the fish. They don't like this orange colour. And they like the shape of the fly, they like the size of the fly, but they don't like the colour of the fly, and I think that's what the problem is. So I don't think there's any point in wasting any more time. I'll just strip this in and go back to black. Black seemed to work. Okay, we've just taken off that orange fly. That obviously was very ineffective. The fish boiled it a few times. Let's pop this thing out here. I've gone to what's called a col de canard emerger, a little olive colour fly, and I think this is going to do the business. We'll pop the fly out, and again, as before, just put the fly down in an area, just prepare yourself, settle yourself down, waiting for the first fish to rise, and it's covering these rising fish that's been proving very successful. And let's see if we can get one to rise out there, or find one rising out there. Again, leave the fly just floating, a little bit of slack as before, just so it's going to drift. There's one a bit too far, that chap. He's about 30 yards, a bit out of range. Now, if only you'd come in towards me just a few more yards, you'd be in range. There's a brown trout there. Let's have a go for this little brownie. He's not a very big fish, but let's see. Oh, there's a better fish. There's a rainbow straight out there. Now, will he come onto this? At the moment, we haven't been that lucky with the fish. They've gone opposite direction from the fly, so where is he here? I know this is the right fly. There's absolutely no qualms about that. This fly will take any fish that's rising if I can just get it in front of his nose. I don't think we'll get any refusals on this fly. But they have stopped. They've gone down again. Very odd. Well, we'll just try twitching that fly. Let's just put a bit of movement. I'll keep that fly coming all the way in now. A little bit of movement. Trying to create a little wake, a little ripple behind it. There's a duck coming towards it now. You watch this. I'll probably catch a duck for dinner. I hope he leaves that alone. He did. It won't be the... Oh, missed it. Pulled it out of his mouth. Far too quick a strike. And there you are. See, there was no fish rising there. And just by twitching that fly, just by moving the fly, it instantly produced a fish coming up to the surface. Most articles and books and magazines will tell you your fly should sit still. Sometimes try moving it. It did work then, and it will sometimes work again. Just remember, too hard a twitch and you're going to sink the fly straight away. It's a brownie. Oh my goodness. That's a brownie. Coming up from the depths. Now this is a brownie, a beautiful brownie. This is more like it. Now let's hopefully we can land this brownie and I'll show you what you're going to do. Now, personally I have a rule, I don't like to keep brown trout. So if we can get this trout in, I'll show you how to return a fish. See him coming up from the depths. Keep him up, don't net any fish you're going to return. Wet your hand, grab the leader, put the rod down. No sudden movements. Gently pick up the fish. Well, he's gone. He shook himself off anyway. But that was a brown trout, and that's what I've been trying to catch all the time, a brown trout. And unfortunately, he shook himself off, but I'd like to have picked that up and just show you the difference between a brown trout and a rainbow trout. And remember that brown trout, prefer to return brown trout. They're the natural wild fish of the waters. That one was a wild brownie. They don't stop brown trout in this lake, so he was going to go back. He's gone back anyway. He's a happy little chap. He got off a bit before I could show you, but he's unharmed and he shot off. Let me just show you some of the basic retrieves. We've got a nymph on here, and one of the most deadly forms of retrieve of the nymph is what's called the figure-of-8 bunch. I'll demonstrate by doing it very slowly to start with, just to give you an idea. You hold the line in your right thumb and index finger, just let the line loose enough to let the line slide through. You take your left thumb and index finger to grab the line, pull your hand up, close 3 fingers around the line you've pulled up, let go with the thumb and index finger, twist and grab again. So it goes 3 fingers, close, down, 3 fingers, open, thumb and index finger, close. 3 fingers, thumb and index, just slowly working the fly with a little twist of the fingers, pulling in the fly like this. And once you've mastered it, you speed up, and this is more like the speed of retrieve you're going to be fishing nymphs at. It's a good standard nymph retrieve. This very steady, not jerky, and imitates the nymph almost perfectly in its retrieve. So it's an essential part of the armoury of anyone who fishes nymphs, spiders, any form of imitative pattern. You do need to know the figure-of-8 retrieve. As before, figure-of-8 retrieve the fly all the way up to the rod, and then just slowly lift. Make sure no nymph is being followed, and pop it back out again. Now the other type of retrieve that's very useful for the nymph is called the sink and draw. And again, hopefully a fish isn't going to take this, and there's one that's risen near it, whilst I'm retrieving it. And the sink and draw is again a very imitative way of retrieving, because what happens is that the fish look at the nymph, and a real nymph in the water, or a real buzzer in the water, squiggles up towards the surface and drops back again. So the retrieve imitates that in a similar way, just with a short pull and a pause. Pull and pause. Pull and pause. And you'll get takes on the draw, which is where you pull it, but you'll get many takes on the sink. When you stop retrieving like that, the nymph will start to sink back down towards the bottom, and you'll be surprised how many takes you get when the nymph starts sinking. However, because you're not pulling in the fly, you will never feel the take when the fly is sinking like this. The only way you'll detect the take on this bit here, the pause, when the fly is sinking, is by watching your strike indicator and just seeing that little twitch. Just as the fly starts sinking, you'll see the indicator twitch and you strike, and hopefully you're onto it. But those are your two main nymphing techniques, the figure of 8 retrieve and the sink and draw. If you can remember those two techniques, both of those work for nymphing, and both of those will give you a good foundation for nymph fishing. With other techniques there's something else, we'll come on to other techniques in a moment, but remember, for nymphing, figure of 8 and sink and draw, most effective techniques. Okay, let's try a change from the nymph and dry fly. I'm going to fish a lure, or show you how to fish a lure now, and a sinking line. In fishing conditions like this, with cloud cover, gentle breeze, warm, fish rising, the last thing you do is put on a lure and a sinking line. But you need to know how to do that, so let me cut off the dry fly and put on a sinking line and a lure. As I showed you earlier on, lures tend to be rather large, sometimes garish, sometimes gaudy, but I'm not going to stick on an extra large lure. I prefer fishing on what we call mini lures, which are small lures. So let me wind the floating line down and thread up with a sinking line, and as I said, we'll try a lure. Now, lure fishing generally is more productive when the water's cold or when the water's hot, when the fish aren't feeding. In extreme conditions, the lure will outcatch the nymph and dry fly. But hopefully, as you'll see from the fishing technique, let me dig it out of here. Hopefully from the fishing technique you'll see that the lure fishing isn't particularly difficult to master. It's fairly simple, and for enjoyment certainly I would stick to nymphs and dry fly all the time. Sinking lines generally are much darker in colour than floating lines. Floating lines you should choose bright yellows, oranges, the colours that I've been fishing with earlier on, and that way you can see the line floating on the water. Sinking lines tend to be dark. So let me just set this up with a sinking line, and as I say, we're just going to try a lure, nothing large. I don't want to fish on an extra large monstrous lure. I just want to put on a mini lure and demonstrate to you the lure fishing techniques and the sinking line techniques. But don't get confused just because I'm putting a lure on a sinking line. You do put sinking lines with nymphs, or fish sinking lines with nymphs. You fish sinking lines with spiders, and you also fish lures with floating lines. This is just to show you how to fish a lure and how to fish a sinking line at the same time. Now, I'm putting on a lure called a woolly worm. It's a very, very deadly lure. And this one's a small size 10 woolly worm, black. I'll just whip it on. And remember, with a sinking line, you don't need to treat your leader to make it sink because the line's sinking. You don't need to treat the fly to make it float because it's a sinking fly. You don't need to treat the fly to make it sink. You don't need to lick the fly, as I showed you earlier on. You need to just tie on your fly and tie it on again. Tie on the fly, and then you are in business. Now, the retrieve for the lure, I'll show you in a second. We'll cast the fly out. I'll let the line sink a little bit to get down to the fish, and then show you the retrieve. But let's give this lure a go. I'll try it over there. Right, sinking line work. Just set the net up just in case. This looks like a spot. I know this lake, and it's one of the advantages with this spot. It's a deep lake, and this corner's deep, so the sinking line's going to go down nicely and not snag quickly on the bottom. Cast the line out, and with sinking lines, one of the most important things is when they land, you can see the line is actually floating on the water, and of course it's a sinking line, you don't want the line to float. So one of the tips is put your rod tip low, just give a short tweak like that, and the sinking line breaks the surface film and is now starting to sink. And then with sinking lines, the most important technique with sinking lines is to count how long you let the line sink. So I let that sink 7 seconds, and a nice slow retrieve. And with lures, you tend to fish it in a variety of manners, like any other technique, but generally fairly long pulls of the left hand. Long pulls, keeping the rod low, and keep your eye on the rod tip, because when a fish takes, usually you'll feel the take, but a lot of the time you'll just see the rod twitch. Draw the fly up to the surface when you're near, check nothing following it, and cast out again. So the sinking line's out. Again, it's still floating. It'll take a few minutes to get wet. Little tweak like that, line sunk. Count the depth. 6, 7, 8. Let's try a count of 8. And again, so important. One of those tips I mentioned earlier on, but I will carry on telling you about it. It's so important is to keep that, oh, there we are, we're on. Keep that rod low, and you can see what happens when a fish takes it. Straight away the rod kicks, and we're into a fish. And it's that low rod that's the good indication of a fish taking the fly. Let's get him on the reel if we can. Whoa, that one's going. Goodness me. Let's bring him in. And again, with that sinking line, because the line's dark colour, because the line's sunk, you're not going to see the take on the line. So what you're looking for, another average, not bad, 2 pound fish. What you're looking for with a sinking line really is the rod tip twitching. A short, sharp twitch of the rod is your indication of a fish taking the fly. Oh, this one certainly thinks he's a monster. Look at him go. God. This is more like a fight. Now, let's bring him in a little bit here. Whoa. In fact, he's going so fast. One of the tips here, if you do get a fish like this, which really does launch itself off when you're playing it, just feather the reel with your finger. Gentle pressure on the rim of the reel, just to slow it down. Let's see if he runs off again, I'll give you a little demonstration of that. Probably won't run now. Let's have a look. So bring it in. Just covering there, just a little bit of tension. Not too much, otherwise you'll lock the reel and the leader will break. Now he's getting to shallow water, he might go. See, normally that's okay, the reel's got a good drag there, but slow it down, just a little dab with the finger, slows it down, brings you back into control of the fish. And that's what you need to be. You've got to be in control of the fish. Remember, you're never trying to horse these fish in. Let's draw them around a bit more to the right. Now he's coming, he's starting to tire a little bit. He's coming up to the surface, coming into shallow water. And again, there's a weed bed there. Let's just try and get him away from that weed bed. Just turn him round. There he is, as before, another good rainbow, about 2 pound. Let's get into position. And again, keep low, keep yourself down, don't let the fish see you. It's so important playing fish that you stay low. There he comes. He's playing about on the top quite a bit now. So he's obviously tired. It was those big runs initially that must have tired him out. Oh, there he goes again. Okay, now, is he tired? He's hooked in the scissors, so you won't get off this one. Famous last words. He's certainly trying everything in the book to go away, going out to the right to deeper water. A little bit of side strain here. We'll just try and draw him back. Put as much pressure as I can on this fish, just to tire him out. And here he comes, that's more like it. He's starting to come up to the surface, and again, we've got the right length now. I've got about 10 foot of line outside, so just use the natural spring of the rod to play a fish. Drawing that fish round. Keep trying to get his head out, lifting the rod tip up, that keeps his head out of the water. Keep the net down, and his head out. And he's all the way into the net. That's a better fish, that's nearly 3 pound. That's much more like a trout. And that's how effective sinking lines and lures can be. Let me just quickly chap it on the head. And once again, we don't want a fish to suffer. And that's what sinking lines and lures can produce. It can produce fish very, very quickly. If the conditions are right like this, you'll pick up fish very, very fast with a lure. So don't bother fishing lures if the fishing is that easy. Dries and nymphs are much more fun in conditions like this. Save the lure for when the fishing is more difficult. Bright sunshine, strong wind, cold water, anything like that is bad fishing conditions. And if I can get my priest back, we'll unhook the fly. Now once again the fly is unhooked itself, come out. And there we have another lovely rainbow. What a beautiful fish. I think I'll just slip him in the bag with the others. let's just pause a moment and have a look at the various retrieves of a sinking line. And pop this thing out again. Hopefully the fish won't follow it and take it this time. As before, just remember with a sinking line that you count the depth, so we cast it out and we'll just let this sink 2 or 3 seconds, counting how deep. See, that last fish was on 8 seconds, so if I was carrying on trying to catch fish, I would stick to 8 seconds before I tried any other depth. Now, fishing lures and fishing sinking lines. If you're fishing lures, you have 3 methods of retrieve, and the first one is just called lure stripping. It's a nice simple technique. Again, hold the line through running right thumb and index finger, left hand, nice smooth long pulls, and you vary the speed of retrieve. Don't just fish a continuous retrieve like this. Fish it, say 2 or 3 casts at this speed of retrieve, and then 2 or 3 casts at stripping it, quite fast stripping like that. That's very effective sometimes. Pop it back out. You can go slowly with a retrieve. With stripping, you can do a nice long slow retrieve. I won't bother letting this sink. You can just do a nice long slow retrieves like that. And really, I can't emphasize enough that if you're not catching fish, you keep changing. Try a little bit quicker retrieve, or a bit quicker retrieve. Anything to try and vary what the fish are seeing. Then there's the figure of 8 bunch. We talked about that with a floating line. It's very effective again with a sinking line and again with a lure. It doesn't matter if it's lure on a floating line or a nymph on a sinking line, it's very effective. And the figure of 8 retrieve, just to recap, this little slow movement. Again, fast if you like, slow if you like, vary your retrieve speed. And again, the fish are having different views of your fly, and again, little pull there. And again, they'll respond as that one did in a totally different manner. And the final retrieve, not such an enjoyable retrieve, but there are days when this works and nothing else works. It's called the Sibley back shuffle, or we call it the Sibley back shuffle. And you tuck the rod under your arm, and this is when fish really want the thing going in fast. So you just hand over hand, really stripping the hands in like this, ripping the line as fast as you can, and some stage you'll get a take on that retrieve. And some days the fish don't want it any slower than that. Thankfully, today isn't one of the days. I'll show you that again, and I'll show you how to strike, because the hardest thing is striking. If you're not holding the rod in your right hand, in slow motion, left and right hand work with each other, and then you get a pull, you just rest the rod on your arm and just lift the arm up, and that's enough of a strike to set the hook. But the one thing I must emphasize about fishing sinking lines and lures, not necessarily just sinking lines, but sinking lines and all lures, and the most effective retrieve of all, this is the one I like, this is what's called the accelerator retrieve, where you just start with a nice steady figure of 8 retrieve, bringing the fly in towards you. And at some stage, it doesn't matter whether you do it within 2 or 3 feet of the cast, or perhaps 20 feet of the cast. At some stage, you just go from the figure of 8 retrieve into smooth, and then a couple of quick pulls, and then back to figure of 8 again. And if you have any fish following you there, when you pull those long, fast pulls, the fish will take it straight away. Absolutely irresistible. So figure of 8, couple of smooth pulls, some fast pulls, and then figure of 8 again like that. And you'll be surprised how many takes you'll get on that first or second big pull. Fish will really have a good old launch at that. Okay, we had a look at lures and nymphs and dries and various other patterns earlier on. One type of lure which I haven't yet talked about or shown you is a thing called a booby. And this is a booby. In fact, these are all boobies here. And boobies are very distinctive because they've got little polystyrene beads for eyes on 2 of them, one either side of its eye. And the idea about a booby is a totally different fishing technique to what we've been doing with this lure. And I'll show you how to fish the booby now. Again, it's not something which I particularly enjoy doing, but it does catch fish, and that's of course what you've got to be able to do. In some hard fishing days, you've got to catch fish. So we'll take our woolly worm off, and I'll just tie on this booby here. Big, bright polystyrene eyes. And the way this booby fishes is to fish it on the sinking line on a very short leader. And I'll cut the leader back to about a foot long, no more than that. And then what happens is the sinking line will sink to the bottom, and the foot leader will hold up like that, and the booby will be held off the bottom, about a foot from the bottom. So I'm guaranteeing that my fly fishes a foot from the bottom. If I wanted 3 foot from the bottom, I would then cut the leader to 3 foot, not 1 foot. Now, as before, when you dispose of monofil, wrap it around your fingers into little tight loops, and then just cut it into two short bits like that. And you must cut your monofill. Never ever throw monofill down on the ground. It absolutely destroys wildlife. So I've got a 1 foot leader on. We'll put on the booby. And remember what I was saying just now about the booby. The sinking line will sink to the bottom given sort of 20 seconds, something like that. And the booby will hold itself just up off the bottom, wafting in the current about that far. There's the fly line on my knee, and there's the booby up by my nose. So that's the kind of depth the booby will be fishing. Now a lot of fisheries, and this fishery in particular, do say no static fly fishing. And the booby originated as a technique for fishing static flies, but you're not allowed to fish static flies, so do check on the rules whether you can fish a static fly or not. And if you can't, yet you still want to fish the booby, you cast the fly out, let it sink to the bottom, wait till the booby's at the depth you want, and then what happens when you pull the booby, it dives down, and then the polystyrene head makes it float back up again. So you get this kind of movement through the water, and that's very, very irresistible to trout. So we'll give it a go, and I'll take it into that deep corner over there, and let's see how the booby performs. Okay, let's try this booby. The booby, as I mentioned, for deep water, fishing deep, getting the fly right down, and particularly useful when the fish are deep in really adverse conditions. But do remember that whilst the line will sink fairly quickly, the booby will hold itself up until the line has gone down, in this case about a foot, seeing I've got a foot leader on. So we cast the booby out, and again the line's been floating for a second, so I'll just give it a twitch, and that gets the fly line to sink, and the booby starts to sink now, and I guess the water's out there is perhaps 6 or 7 foot, and I can just see, even with my Polaroids, I can see the fluorescent green of the booby's head starting to drop down, and perhaps this line would sink 6 foot in about 30 seconds. So you wait for a good 30 seconds. In fact, there's a fish just boiled at it. And, you can't see that normally when the fly is deep. And then once the line's sunk, remember you're not allowed static flies, so a reverse sink and draw, pull, wait. Watch your rod tip. Pull, wait. And when you pull, this time instead of the fly lifting to the surface, the fly dives to the bottom. And when you stop pulling, the fly lifts up again. Up, there you are, and that's how effective it is. Straight away. Saw the rod tip, slight twitch on the rod, and absolutely straight into boobies. And again, you don't, ooh, he thinks he's a sea trout, this one, airborne. Let's see if he'll come up again. Once again, you don't need boobies in conditions like this. I'm just trying to give you a good overall impression of various fishing tactics and techniques, so that on some days when the fish, fishing's not that easy, you can try something like the booby, and as you can see, it works very well indeed. Oh, this one's well gone. He's a real fighter, this chap. That's more like it. This is the fun part of fishing. I think the fight is everything. It's the skill of just being able to control that fish, turning him away from weed beds. In this case, there aren't any out there. It's just deep water. Let's just turn him around so we can get him into the picture. Oh, that's it. There he comes. Another rainbow. Now, is he going to launch himself off this time or not? Let's have a look. He's thinking about it. No, he's not going to launch himself this time. Let's turn him back again. Bring his head up. Straight into the net. Oh, look at that, he's trying to go. That's it, keep his head up. As long as his head's up, you're in no trouble. And straight in. Chalk one up for the booby. Another success on the booby nymph. We're in on the last cast of the day. I was just thinking it's about time to pack up. The sun's come out, it's put the fish down, and I put on, this time, just a little weighted nymph, something with a bit of weight to get down, a little bit deeper. Oh, yes, it's more like it. And hey presto, second cast with a weighted nymph results in a fish. Here comes another rainbow. And you can see the importance there of changing and keep on changing if you're not catching fish. It's gone a bit dour, so we put on this weighted fly, and the fly went down about 2 foot to 3 foot deeper. And now all we need to do is get this in to complete a wonderful day, complete the bag. A couple of great runs, it absolutely shot off. Here he comes into the margin, so that's not a bad fish. You see me, he'd be gone straight away. There you go. Just turn him around into some clearer water. Now he's in shallow water. I dare say he'll bolt off once more, unless he's tired himself out. Let's have a look. Just draw him round there. Let's see if we can keep his head out. Oh, you saw on the net. Big mistake there, moving the net. Never anticipate the fish coming into the net. Just draw the fish in, and he's all the way into the net. And there we are, the last fish of the day. As before, a quick dispatch. And then we're going to unhook the fish. Get out quite easily. And there he is, the final fish of the day. And that is what reservoir and lake fishing is all about. Hopefully from this video you'll learn 1 or 2 of the tips. Hopefully it'll improve your casting and your fishing techniques. And tomorrow I'm on the river trying to show you the basics of river fishing. And if you'd like to join me for that, you'd be more than welcome.